Hi, this is Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I am Siofra Bradigan. So today I would like to talk about the subject of purpose. Why am I here? This is a pretty common question a lot of us struggle with, like, is there something special I'm supposed to do? Um, what is the job that I'm here to accomplish? And it's not a simple answer. Like everything else, there's layers to it. First off, one thing you can be rest assured of, in my opinion, is that you are not here to save the world, not the whole thing. Our world is complex. There are thousands of different kinds of cultures and religions and spiritual beliefs and situations and economies and governments out there. And some of you are from different parts of the planet. And the notion that we come here in order to save everyone is flawed and dangerous on its face. For one, it smacks of hubris, ego-centric thinking, sort of pumping up our own sense of importance to keep us going in a certain direction. And it can lead to dangerous mental states, delusional states, that can sort of fracture a person's relationship with the world and with the people around them to the point where they're not really able or capable of saving anyone or anything, including themselves. So I've been seeing a lot more of this. I see it on a regular basis when I'm looking at different sites and, having people, make these big, grandiose statements about how that they're here to save all of humanity. And it worries me. It really does. Because it's actually purposeless to have that as the reason that you're here, since it can't be accomplished. Global warming, global climate change, as an example, is a complex and worldwide issue. And there are 7.5 or so billion people who live on this planet, who all have their own ideas of what to do and how to do it. The only way we can successfully address a true global issue is as a global community, not as individuals. Like individuals, as an individual, you can do a portion. And that's the thing, is like people see these larger issues as so overwhelming and daunting that it often stops us from doing anything at all, because for some reason we think we have to have the whole answer to every question that there is in existence, instead of having a part of an answer or, a piece of a puzzle to help. So when it comes to something like global warming or global climate change, as it's more commonly known nowadays, because people got confused with the idea or the word of warming being in the sentence when we had harsher winters. So scientists have changed the terminology to global climate change to try and avoid some of those issues. The best thing any one of us can do for a large issue is to find things that we can do for ourselves to add to the solution rather than perpetuate the problem. So finding local groups and what your own community is doing to try and address the issue, whether it's planting more trees to, help with the oxygen saturation on the planet as a whole, or what have you. Like, it's sort of like trying to help the unhomed which is another large issue, especially here in the United States, that if you were trying to solve it all by yourself, it would also be impossible. It's like, that's the thing. To set ourselves an impossible task and an impossible goal serves to freeze us in place and just confuse the whole situation. And some people who join the magical community, paganism in all of its different sizes and shapes, are drawn to it because it helps give us a better sense of ability, of power to affect change. But the change that we can affect the most is the change in our own lives and in ourselves and our core personality, in how we interact with the larger world issues and problems that surround us and help us to sort of read the currents of what's happening around us so we can navigate through those with the greatest potential for survival on the other side of whatever it happens to be. So I know that there is this notion that everyone's ideas have merit and that no one can be wrong about their inner magical reality, and you should always err on the side of acceptance and never call anybody on their stuff. That hasn't worked. I have not seen that work at all. It just seems to discourage more delusional thinking. Here's an example, personal example, of an encounter that I had. Because I am sometimes more public than other witches out there, I have on occasion received phone calls from random individuals and some of the strangest voicemails I think I've ever even imagined anyone would leave. So the one that was the most remarkable for its level of disconnection from reality, in my opinion, was this gentleman who called and told me that he wanted to become a werewolf. And he wondered if maybe I had a ritual that he could do that would help him become a werewolf, because he really wanted to worship, and I can't remember exactly which phrasing he used, the mother of all sorrows, or the mother of all darkness, or something along those lines. I'm not sure what TV show he got that from, if that was from maybe Shadowhunters or some other, like-minded TV show out there, which I enjoy watching, but no, isn't real as far as everyday reality. And I mentioned this to a group of elders in my community at the time and asked them what they thought of this crazy phone call. And a whole bunch of them said, well, you shouldn't dissuade or discourage him from wanting to do this, because who are you to say that this can't actually happen? And so what you should do is suggest that he find a group of like-minded individuals in a larger city where you have the better potential to find apparently a group of werewolves. So I just didn't respond at all, because I didn't really see any point in responding to this individual's query, because the only thing I know of in the lore that would help him become a werewolf would be to find another werewolf and get bitten and not eaten. But the question remains, why would he think this was a good idea? Because if you look at the lore of becoming a werewolf, there's very little actual, what would you call it? There's a lot of fantastical thinking, but none of it is generally positive. The notion of being a werewolf is not being able to control your impulses when the moon is full, and to the point where you could hurt or even murder your loved ones. That's certainly the image that has been presented in, not just lore, but media, TV, movies, and all that other stuff. So why would someone think that this would be a good thing to do? And the only answer is there's something wrong with the way this person is thinking, to me, if what they want is to acquire a condition where they're no longer responsible for their own actions and where they can hurt other people and have a reason that they can look to and say, it wasn't my fault because I was under the thrall of the moonlight during a full moon and I couldn't help myself, which goes totally counter to my own beliefs and what I think we're here to do, to take personal responsibility for our own stuff. So that's one, basic example. And the idea of being a savior is probably the most common delusion out there. Most cults start on that basis, whether they're a Buddhist cult or a Christian cult or, whatever. They start with a central person who promotes the notion that they themselves are like the Son of God or some special master from another part of the universe or whatever story or narrative they want to package that in. And some of them genuinely believe their own hype. They believe that that's what they're here to do. And if you consider the notion that if you truly believe that this is your purpose, and it's a purpose that can't successfully be, fulfilled, because let's face it, there are 7.5 billion individuals out there, and each one of them is responsible for their own development and their own actions, then it is a narrative that is doomed to fail. And if somebody is really committed to that narrative, then they are doomed to fail, and at some point that realization will have to hit. And then there's that whole past, like, I have failed to fulfill my purpose. There's no point in being here, and that can lead to suicidal ideation or thought processes and that kind of thing, which is just not okay. That's very damaging to everyone, including the person who is feeling that way. And so, to me, I used to feel a lot of that myself when I was younger. Like, why am I here? What am I supposed to do? And some of the experiences that I had, for example, when I had that, I don't know what it was, hold me down in my bed and try to possess me, and I was able to stop that process and rebuff it and get out of there. One of the things that popped into my mind trying to understand the experience, to put it into a context, was that it had attacked me at a time in my life when it thought I wouldn't be ready, so that it could stop me, and with other it's or they, before I was able to defend myself, so that I wouldn't be able to do what it was I was here to do, what I was meant to do. I now think that that's just an attempt to create a narrative in my own mind in order to give meaning to potentially a meaningless thing. There may have been no actual meaning. It could have just been one of these things that happens. So that's part of why I want to talk about this, is because I know from personal experience that desire and that need to try and save everyone and everything. And for a long time, I believed that that was my purpose. And of course, remembering that lifetime where I decided to come to a world that was dark and empty and to bring light to it didn't help as far as being able to become more grounded and centered and in the life that I'm in. So I understand the need and that feeling of wanting a higher purpose from the inside, not intellectually. So that's why I thought it'd be good to talk about, because I know that that's something a lot of people wonder. It's like, why am I here? What am I doing? What am I supposed to do? It's probably one of the more common questions that people might ask a psychic if they get a psychic reading. Besides the other more common questions like, am I going to get married? Am I going to have children? Am I supposed to move? Is this the right job for me? And all those other life choices that you ought to be making for yourself and not depending on a stranger with quote-unquote psychic abilities to make it for you. But aside from that, it's also a burden when you think that way, because I felt Like, if I failed, I mean, if something happened to the world, that would mean that I failed, and it would be personally my fault, which is also, on the face of it, utterly ridiculous, because there are 7+ billion people on the planet. And there's no way for one individual to control the minds, emotions, and evolution of all of those individuals and what they're doing and why they're here. Because most of us, maybe all of us, are not here for like that kind of a higher purpose to save civilization, save the planet, save the universe, whatever it is. We're here to learn how to be the best versions of ourselves that we can be. And that requires work. That requires being able to look at these notions that we might carry with us and evaluate whether they're valuable in any way at all. So you can take anything like that, anything that someone says to you, and then look at it and evaluate the worth of that way of thinking. Thinking that you're here to save the world is not a valuable way of thinking, because it's not something you can be successful at. Thinking that you're here to improve yourself and to become a better version of yourself, to have a good life, to develop healthy, meaningful relationships, to create positive boundaries with people, these are things that can be done. And these are things you can succeed at. So if you're going to pick something you want to do, pick something you can succeed at, even if the work is hard, rather than some grandiose notion that is potentially damaging to your psyche and impossible to succeed with. And I find it interesting that of all the delusional kinds of thinking out there, that is the most common one, thinking you're here to save the world. So it might, I don't know, speak to a human need to make things right and to fix things, perhaps. I'm not sure. But that's a different kind of question. So, of the other, a lot of times people reach out to me and ask for help of one kind or another. And often the help I give them is not help that they want, because they want me to reiterate how they feel and confirm their conclusions. And as human beings, we look for that. I mean, if if you are somebody who, say, loves to play basketball or any other sport, and you're good at it, then you get encouragement from other people who play the same thing, and they let you know how well you're doing. If you're bad at it, and people are always dissuading you, it creates this resentment and anger, and it's difficult to give up the dream of doing it because you want to fight for what you think is what you should be doing instead of accepting the reality that this is not a skill set that you possess. You know, just as sort of a basic real world example of that. And there's nothing wrong with not being good at everything. That's another myth. It's like we all have different skills, we all have different perceptions of what's going on out there, and some of us are better at certain things, and others of us are better at different things. So not each person who is enlightened or a genius or whatever is going to be a world-class pianist or musician of any kind, or a writer of novels, or a leader in the scientific community to create whatever it is society might need. And the idea that magic can overcome these basic personality traits that we come with is, again, not a valid way of looking at magic. Magic is there to assist where you already are and help enhance where you are and allow you to move yourself in the direction that you're already headed. So if you're insistent on maintaining a notion that won't work, it's sort of like being the guy at the foot of the mountain with the little pick trying to take down the entire mountain. Maybe eventually it could be accomplished, but it's going to take how many years to do it? And so it's an endeavor that has no movement forward. It's just repetition of the same thing. So I like to look at a lot of those kinds of stories that we tell ourselves because I think it's important to evaluate them and evaluate their worth. And they're our stories. We're the ones who are making them up. These are not universal truths necessarily. They are things that have been said, whether they've been said 10,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago or 50 years ago or yesterday. Just because a group of people believe in their veracity doesn't actually make them any kind of a universal truth. So when I look at things that work for me and that make sense to me, for example, the idea of alien consciousness, spiritual awareness outside of our solar system, somewhere out in the galaxy, I find that a less than useful notion. Whether they exist or not is beyond the point, or beside the point in this case, because if it takes my attention from doing the real things that are here and now that I can help with on the planet and with the people that I know and I care about, and it's some pie in the sky ideal that at some point we're all going to ascend into a higher state of consciousness and understand the answers to everything in the universe, it doesn't serve me at all. Because that's like too far away. If I can't get there by taking one step in front of me, then what's the point of taking it in and using it as a guiding principle for whatever I do next? So I know people have asked me about that whole ascension thing on several of my live shows. And the idea, again, sort of goes back to the beginning, the idea of being able to save all of humanity by forcing us to ascend to a higher state of existence, and that in itself will be enough to save us, I think is not true. I don't think that, I think a few people might. If you look historically, we've had a few people here and there throughout the centuries that you might call enlightened beings. And even the enlightened beings only affected the groups of people that they were in contact with, that were around them at the time. Later, we created larger stories around that, and then we kept spreading the stories in cases of certain religious figures. But that doesn't change the fact that when they were alive and when they were here on Earth and being enlightened, they affected their portion of the planet. They didn't affect the entire planet. None of them have affected the entire planet. And that's that whole notion again of saving all of humanity. So it's clear that even with the best of what we can produce and incarnate as, that's not possible. So to let go of that isn't a bad thing. So although I have seen some pretty odd things in my life, like things I can't explain, like the shapeshifter that my husband and I both witnessed at the same time in broad daylight, we have no idea what that was. But it certainly was interesting to see it. So I believe that there are things we don't understand, and plenty of those things have to do with magic, energy, states of consciousness, and everything else. So this isn't in any way to invalidate any of that. Obviously, I'm a witch. I use magic on a regular basis, or what I consider magic, which is being a conscious co-creator of my own life and my internal pattern that I use to communicate with and navigate through the life that I happen to be in right now. That was a bunch of words that may not make sense to some, but they were the words that came at the time. But we set ourselves up for failure when we reach too far, and that's part of the negative self-talk. It's a way of setting ourselves up so that we can never actually reach whatever our goal is. And even if it's not as grandiose a goal as saving the planet, If it's a smaller goal, it's still, as long as we're like leaping ahead into the future and imagining the goal that we want, then we're not living in the life that we have. And if there are other things that could open up, other doors, other paths, and so forth that might be presented before our feet, we won't see any of those because we're focused on this ideal, this notion of this goal somewhere out there. And almost always, in my experience, if we reach that goal, it's never what we thought it would be, and it's not satisfying in any way. Because, the disappointment of reaching an imaginary goal that you have built up this whole inner world and state and so forth around in order to accomplish, it doesn't fit the reality of whatever that goal is because there are other people there besides you. So if it's like an artistic goal, becoming a famous singer or whatever, you can accomplish that goal, become a famous singer, but it's going to be surrounded with people who are trying to take advantage of someone's fame and wealth. It's going to be surrounded by other people who have a different notion of what the person's art should look like or sound like and where they should go and what they should do with it. There's going to be a lot of forces trying to imprint themselves and their vision of what that should be on it, which is why it's so important to do the work and create those personal boundaries so that if you get to a place like that, where you find yourself in a position where you now have more influence over other people, you're not going to be immediately knocked off of your own perch that you've created for yourself by the first person who sends you a negative tweet or a comment or whatever and doesn't like your style or what you're doing, because you can never please everyone. That's a given. And not everyone's going to like you. And if everyone does like you, you're doing something wrong. Well-defined people are the kind of people that I enjoy. I don't like people that are wishy-washy and are willing to just sort of change their minds instantaneously just because I say something. It's like being a well-defined person means that you have decided for yourself what is good behavior, what is wrong behavior, what is okay to have done to you, what you are okay doing with others. And there's nothing wrong with defining those things because that's how you create your own personal path. And in magic and paganism and so forth, there are so many potential options that are out there. There are so many different ways to go. And like I've talked about before with, my personal relationship with the universe, I try not to steer my path in one direction or another on my own because I know that I don't know everything, and that's okay. But what I do is define myself and what I want or what I'm good with and what I'm okay with and what's not okay with me, that kind of thing. And then when the universe presents me with an option, an opportunity to do something, then I can look at that opportunity or that situation and I have a template in myself to be able to decide whether this is a good idea or not for me. The universe doesn't care what I do. It isn't the judge, jury. It's not watching you all the time, and it's aware of you all the time, but it's not that kind of awareness. It's like, because we're one particle in what? How many galaxies are there that are out there in the universe? And that's the all of everything, and we're just this tiny little speck. Our planet's a speck, and we're even smaller than that. We're smaller than a piece of sand. We're minuscule, minute, and our desire to be important is one of the things that leads us down difficult paths. It's like, that kind of importance. So I express who I am. I put out my particular energy. I let it go out there into the universe and decide if I'm going to respond to someone or not, what I'm going to say or not. Am I going to take them seriously or not? And I generally try to take people seriously. I try to look underneath, like the message. The guy on the voicemail, there really wasn't much I could do with that because he was like, it seemed to be too solidified. But I've had other situations where someone have asked me a question about, like, how can you help me with this? And I look at what this is that they're asking me to help with, and realize that it's a fantasy and it's not based in reality. And so I usually tell them that part, but then I look at the underlying reasons why somebody would be into having a fantastical existence in order to make themselves feel important, and try to address that issue of lack of self-worth, because that's, to me, the core of that, is that feeling like, unless I'm very important, I'm not worth anything. And that's a sad place to start from, because being alive is a gift from the universe. This is an opportunity for us to experience the whole of existence, the part that we can reach at any rate, in a unique manner that's not like any other life form out there. We have our own unique way to interact with all this energy. But then we're not here alone. We're here with everything else that exists. We're here with the rocks and the trees and the grass and the birds and the animals that walk upon our planet and the fish that are in our sea. And they are all a part of our biosphere. And it's the idea that we are somehow greater than, better than, and above all of this that leads to some of our worst mental states. If somebody's having, like, a difficult time letting go of the notion of being here to save everyone and everything, then the suggestion is to save something in your neighborhood. Finding someone who's down on their luck, who is become elderly and can't mow their own lawn, and mow their lawn. Little acts of kindness have a huge impact on the rest of society and the universe. And even if it's just one person that you can reach out and help and think of someone else other than just ourselves, then that's a good thing. That becomes a good thing. That becomes a good energy that then things can snowball and they can roll with that. And you might end up in city government and be able to affect change in your country or your town or your community. It doesn't have to be like a big office, like, running the whole country kind of thing, but it can be like a city council or a committee that gets together to try and brainstorm ideas of how to help those who are less fortunate. It's like finding ways to give back to the earth and to the planet. And if it's not people you're interested in, nature conservation, doing what you can to help with a park, a forest, whatever it is that's around you. And it's when we engage with the rest of life that we make progress, and we don't have to even notice that we're making it. It doesn't have to be big whistles and bells going off and firecrackers shooting off in the sky saying, "Hey, you've arrived, yay you, look what you've done." It can be small little things, rescuing a kitten. It's anyway. So hopefully this will generate some thoughts. This is the idea of this video, is to give people something to think about and to consider, whatever your situation is and whatever ideas you think you have about the universe, to look at them and look at what their far-reaching potential impact truly is on yourself and your own psyche and on other people around you. So that would be my advice, is to look at that narrative and follow where it goes, and then see if it leads to a good place or not. And it's there's lots of other conversations for us to have, but this seemed a timely one after Ian's sister coming into our lives briefly, if that, in her completely and totally psychotic break, thinking that one of her purposes is to figure out this giant puzzle that she finds herself in the middle of by wandering around the streets in the weather without any safety or potential food or shelter, knowing where that's coming from, to save the world. That's her delusion, is she thinks that she's here to save the world. And it's keeping her going and keeping her feet moving and her, walking on her path. And apparently the idea of giving that up is so potentially dangerous in her own mind that to even believe that the idea that her children are dead and to discover that they're not is threatening to her whole sense of reality, which made her break. And so facing reality is one of the things I'm about. Even if my reality is different from other people, I want to face it, whatever it happens to be. And hopefully this will help any of you who are wondering about why you're here have a better handle on it, or just decide I'm full of it, whatever it is. So I guess that's it for today. I'll see you guys on Sunday when we have our live show. So far, things are working out for that to happen. Ian is still sick, unfortunately, today. Hopefully he'll be better in a couple of days, but if not, I'll be here and I'll do a better job of watching that little timer. If it freezes again, I'll stop sooner and get back online. That was just strange and weird. Anyway, so I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving, or whatever holiday you may or may not have celebrated, because Thanksgiving is not necessarily the whole planet. That was here in the United States. I don't know if other countries do this Thanksgiving thing or not. Artificially created holidays for us to spend more of our money on the people that we love. Yay. But anyway, hope you all had a good Thursday, let's say that. And this is Friday today, and this will come up sometime tonight or tomorrow morning. I guess we'll see if Ian can get it done, stuff he has to do in order to, make it uploadable. So, wishing you all the best. So this is Siofra Bradigan, and this has been Siofra's Magic Alcove. Blessed be.